fact, many of you will be very aware of what the Institute for Advanced Study does. One of the things that we seek to do is to facilitate and encourage faculty research and creative activity and bringing faculty members together. We do this in a number of ways. One of the ways is by a series of inter- or transdisciplinary seminars. We have a named lecture. We also have a program that we've had since the very beginning of the Institute for Advanced Study. That is a program of visiting fellows. Any faculty person on any of Indiana University's 8 campuses can invite a colleague from somewhere else to come here and to consult or collaborate. And we don't actually ask anything of these fellows except their consultation and collaboration. For one thing, we ask them to give a public lecture so that people outside of the small community will have the opportunity of knowing of their research and of the knowledge which they can share with us. It's, of course, that lecture that brings us here this afternoon. And I'm very happy to turn things over now to Rick Wilk, who will introduce our speaker.
Well, I'll try to be brief, but I'm really happy to be able to introduce Guliz Ger this afternoon. Guliz is a associate provost and professor of marketing in the business school at Bilkent University. Her education includes an undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois, where she studied psychology, sociology, and mathematics. She has an MBA from Middle Eastern University in Ankara, and she has a PhD in marketing from Northwestern University. And you'll notice that the word anthropology did not escape from my mouth anywhere during that sequence of educational achievements. Yet I consider Guliz to be one of my best colleagues in anthropology. This I think, represents some major changes that have been taking place both in anthropology and in marketing over the last 10 or 15 years. And Guliz has been one of the leaders in bringing consumer research and marketing together with anthropology. And in fact, she occupies a space now where it's very difficult to tell these two disciplines apart. She has loads and loads of publications, and many of them are co-authored with colleagues in Denmark, in the United States, in Turkey, and I think this reflects both the multinational and multidisciplinary nature of her research. She is here because we're working on a project on religion and material culture. And this just represents a fraction of her interests in consumer culture, in the modern condition, in materialism, and even more broadly in the way that human beings experience their lives as surrounded by material objects and construct themselves and their identities through material goods. So I'd love to talk about Guliz for half an hour or maybe an hour, but I think I'll let her talk today. So, Guliz?
Thank you. Well, with this introduction, the expectations have been built up so much that I will never be able to measure up to them. Being in Indiana is a great pleasure. Thank you very much to the Institute and to Rick Wilk for having me here.
I have a wonderful office at the Institute. There's a shower in it, believe it or not. And with this hot weather, I'm taking advantage of it. And being here is a rejuvenating experience because, as Rick said, I did my undergraduate in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And this is my first time in Bloomington in this campus. But it reminds me of Champaign-Urbana, nostalgia, my youth undergraduate days. So this is a very, very pleasant experience. Okay, what I'll talk about today is carpets, Turkish carpets, handmade carpets, and how the scene of carpet weaving and selling has been changing given globalization. And I'm working with a Danish colleague who was at Bilkent University and who recently moved to Copenhagen Business School. And the purpose of this co-authorship is to be able to approach the topic from different perspectives. I'm Turkish, so sort of an insider, not a fully insider because I don't live in the village. I'm not one of the weavers. He is a total outsider who lived in Turkey for several years. So it was a lot of fun to discuss the field. We went to the field together because we brought in so many different perspectives. And I think our work benefited from that collaboration. Before I begin, I'd like to show you some pictures. You will hear me talk about traditional methods. The word tradition will figure in a lot. There are certain things about handmade carpets that make them authentic, in quotes. One of them is that the wool should be hand spun, and this is the process of hand spinning. She still continues to hand spin in an area where there's a revival of traditional carpets. This is mother and daughter in a town southeast, middle southeast of Turkey, at home. So some people weave at home. They have these looms set up inside the home. In other places, there are workshops, and this is a site from such a workshop further east in Turkey. And this woman is Turkish. She lives in Philadelphia, and I'll be talking more about her operation. This is the Yevramovich Woven Legends carpets, for those of you who may know them. And she has 5,000 weavers and dyers and spinners working for her, all in the eastern part of Turkey. And she comes to Turkey every month or so to check up on and to control the quality, etc. So she visits these workshops. And what I'd like you to notice here is that this place is heated with a stove. And when we walked in there, the stove was not on, and the place was freezing, and this was the month of January. And the looms are steel rather than wood, which was the traditional form. And you see catalog pieces or the models which have been pre-prepared, hanging from the loom so that the women look at them and weave by looking at these, what are called models. And this is one of the dyeing areas, dyeing yarn, again in Malatya, the same operation. And this is not a bad picture. This is how the place looks. Okay? This is exactly how the place looks. Okay, I'll be showing you lots more pictures, but let me move on for now. There is a mystique and aura of carpets. And there are lots of ways that this mystique is built up. And one of that, well, it's getting worse.
No, we can't see this end of it. This end, you can move it over. There, okay, there you go.
Okay. This is Alexander, who's a carpet connoisseur, scholar, and he says, I have become convinced that a carpet, when it's a good one, reverberates with some kind of primitive and archetypal force, that it has in it some kind of being, that it connects with some primitive, almost animistic soul of the world, and that the carpet must be judged in the end according to the degree to which it does or it does not make a connection with this force. So the carpet collectors, the literature on carpet, the scholarship on carpets, handmade carpets, sort of resonate these kinds of feelings of primitivism, animalism, the origin, the authenticity, the aura, the mystique of flying carpets, if you will. However, we're in the age of globalization. And here's an advertisement from a magazine called Halı. Halı in Turkish means carpet. The magazine is a British magazine for collectors, but it's called Halı. And let's read. Luxurious, sumptuous, opulent, magnificent. Just run your hands through the pile of any piece in this collection and you will know what the good life is all about. The finest worsted wool from New Zealand and Argentina are blended for a uniquely supple texture. The designs represented are rare Persian patterns mixed with European and Indian silk textile motifs created using the very best Swiss dye colors. Now, we talked about the aura, the mystique of carpets, and some of you who have been in the Middle East, Persia, Turkey, Morocco, may have bought carpets, and when you go into a carpet store to buy something and you try to train yourself, the kinds of things that you're told that you should look at are how old the carpet is, where does it come from, what material has been used, the colors, is there uprush, which is gradation in the colors, how will the colors fade depending on the dyes that are used, particular designs, floral, geometric, etc. How does it feel to touch? The weave, the fineness, the knots, and the condition of it, if it's an old one particularly. And the carpet dealers talk about consumers by calling them certain labels. One of them is a ruggie. A ruggie is a person who is passionate about carpets. And then there are knot counters. These are, looking at the fineness of the carpet by these technical details. So we see emotional and or technical judgment of what a good carpet might be. Okay, with this introduction to what carpets are and how they're made, a very brief introduction, where I'm coming from, what is my perspective in doing this study? Globalization has been seen as interconnection, interpenetration of different spaces in terms of economic, political, cultural forces. And typically people talk about the flow of Western products to everywhere in the world, the remotest locations. Hence we talk about, and people have written about McDonaldization, or in Barber's terms, the McWorld. And not many people write about the flow of the products of the rest of the world to the center, if you will. However, there is work on banana republicanization, the Thai and Chinese restaurants in London, New York, and Indianapolis, and Bloomington, etc. So this study is looking at what happens to a product from the other, not non-West, within these global interconnections. And my particular question concerns modernization tradition, modern tradition, how do they talk to each other? The main positions in the literature, I'm not going to quote names. Detraditionalization, commodification of culture is a trend that has been identified. And other trends that have been identified or other dynamics are reinvented traditions, tribalism, and hybridity in particular. So my question is, do traditions survive or are they revived? Is that possible? The word tradition is a problematic concept, you know. I'm not going to go into that, but it is itself a very problematic concept, and I realize that traditions are always changing things. They're not static things. But what I'm looking at is more than this quote-unquote natural change in the traditions. And again, there's literature that says that the modern and the traditional coexist. So I'm trying to figure out and explore in this study, when do they coexist? Under what conditions do they coexist? How do they coexist? So basically, I'm looking at the global-local encounters, given the tensions of lived modernity of the people who are in these networks. I'm focusing on one object, and the study focuses on both consumption and production of carpets. The study is still ongoing. It's not finished. And our approach is multi-sited ethnography, follow the thing, through different sites of production, dealing, marketing, selling, and consumption. Our informants are dye and yarn producers, weavers, washers, dealers. Washers are people who chemically wash the carpets to change the coloring, to make them look more antique and more pale, to give them patina without them having had the patina. So patina becoming fashionized, if you will. And this washing process is sometimes also called engineering or doctoring. We focused on 8 enterprises, and these enterprises are success cases. And they define their own success in their own terms. Some of them have huge sales volume, others have incredibly high prices. The Yevromovich carpets, the workshop that the picture of which I showed you, sell in New York anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 per piece. Others are not that expensive and they don't have that volume, but within whatever it is that they're doing, they consider themselves successful. And these enterprises vary on where they work in Turkey, what types of carpets they make, more traditional to more contemporary designs. The qualities vary, prices vary. How the producers, the designers, the originators of business think about design and material, that varies. Their labor policies vary. Do they pay per hour, per knot? And their target markets vary. Some sell in the US only, some sell in Europe only, some sell in Turkey, some sell all over the place. And in terms of consumers, we interviewed some Turkish consumers, urban middle class, some collectors, and others just casual consumers. Western consumers, we haven't done much with them yet. This is the part that's still ongoing. We intend to talk to tourists and expatriates in Turkey. We've talked to some expatriates. And we also intend to talk to consumers and collectors in the USA and Germany, particularly New York and Hamburg, because those are supposed to be the best carpet markets for handmade carpets. And the part that you cannot read is that we're also studying the connoisseur literature and advertising in carpet literature. A little background on the Turkish carpets. When people think about handmade carpets, the word Oriental carpet comes to mind. And with that, Persian carpets come to mind. In Turkey, traditionally, carpets were made as dowry pieces. And that means the woman who is getting married brings in some stuff with her into her new home. And textiles are a major part of this, and carpets used to be a part of that. So she and her mother typically wove enough pieces for her to use on the floor as sacks, as bed coverings, as sofa coverings, etc. She also gave one as a gift to the in-laws, and depending on the village, there are other traditions as to what kinds of gifts are made. And they were also seen in mosques. They were made for mosques and donated to mosques. That was the traditional use. What's happening now? You go to a village and the dowry tradition continues, but a lot of them buy machine-made carpets for their dowry rather than making their own, because they're cheaper, easier, and they think that they keep the house warmer, the machine carpets. This is compared to kilims. One thing I forgot to mention, there are carpets which have a pile on them, and then there are kilims which are flat woven. So the carpets keep the floor warmer than kilims. Now, in some places, the dowry, making carpets for the dowry does continue, but those are rare places. You have to really search for them. This is a village where nomads settled, and she's a woman who got married about 2 months ago when I took this picture. And she's showing us her dowry sacks. She also has made kilims and other pieces from these carpets. And it's interesting, she has 2 pairs of everything, 4 of everything. And 1 pair is for her to keep, and 1 pair is made thinking that this is like her insurance. If they have financial difficulty, they will be selling this. And I'm telling this because this part of making carpets for sale is already a part of tradition. In the urban areas, urbanites are after modernization. Some of them have modernized, the others are still in the process of modernization in their own eyes. So they want their homes to look like what a Western home looks like, and they follow global fashions. And they will have handmade carpets, not all of them, some of them. But typically they'll have the hardwood floors or wall-to-wall carpeting and just a few pieces of Turkish carpets on top of that. Sometimes they'll make an Oriental corner, and that's it's called in Turkish. It's called an Oriental corner, and the carpet is placed in that corner. And a lot of people are not interested, and they will use the carpet as a piece of decoration just like any other home accessory. In the West, the carpets, Turkish carpets, Persian carpets, were introduced to the West with the Crusades in the 11th century. And 15th to 17th centuries, there was a great interest in Turkish carpets. Churches and clergy started collecting them first. Then the kings, palaces, princes, aristocracy, then the elites. And 19th century saw the Orientalist paintings and the expositions, international expositions, Vienna, Paris, London, where carpets were prominent. And this is a painting from late 19th, early 20th century, harem dance. This is not a problem with the slide. This is my JPEG resolution quality, unfortunately. So you don't see much of it, but there are carpets all over the floor. So in all of most of Orientalist painting, And most of the Orientalists thought carpets played a prominent role. And I noted that Edward Said's book, Orientalism, at least the copy that I have, has the snake charmer on it with carpets under the feet of the snake charmer. So there are all these kinds of imaginary that's associated with carpets. It's associated with prestige, with wealth, with the aesthetics of the other, enchantment with the other and the exotic, and this passion for the primitive, the animistic, the origins. Plus, to really tell what a good carpet is, you need to accumulate a lot of knowledge. It's not something that you can just see. And that knowledge, that cultural capital, also adds to the prestige value of the carpets. Now, what has happened with modernity? Mid-19th century, synthetic dyes were introduced, and wool was begun to be spun by machines rather than by hand. This meant the loss of the link to the past, because it was industrial now. And loss of aesthetics, because the colors were not the same, the fading over the years was not the same, visual harmony was not the same. Colors were stronger with synthetic dyes. And the machine production meant the irregularities were removed, whereas irregularities were seen to be part of the personality, idiosyncrasy of an individual carpet. And there's a lot of global competition, apparently, and currently, in the specific case of Turkish carpets, the greatest competition is from Indian and Chinese carpets, because the labor is cheaper in India and China, and Turkish carpets are facing dire straits because of that. Marketability concerns has led to issues such as Japanese like colors blue and yellow. I'm making this up. Americans from the Midwest like blah blah colors. Americans from California like blah blah colors. The Germans like these colors and these kinds of designs. So rather than the weaver expressing her own emotionality and her own life, now there's a lot more of the penetration of the demand side into how a carpet is made. The doctoring that I talked about, this chemical washing and pressing of the carpets, for some reason the ends of these slides have been cut off. So that last line should read, with the lure of modernity and cash crops, loss of interest in weaving. And there what's happening is in the villages, where while mothers are still weaving, that's not what they envision and aspire to for their daughters. They'd rather have their daughters go to school and be modernized and get a modern city job rather than weave. So there's a loss in the interest in weaving from the weaving side as well in all of this. Plus they figure, you know, this is hard work and it's better, even if they are going to stay in the village, cash crops may provide more income than weaving carpets. So the situation right now is the glory era is passé, and there's more competition and there are more problems and issues in the field. Okay, I'll begin to talk about these 8 enterprises, not each and every one of them, but some selected ones, in terms of how handmade carpets are produced and marketed in Turkey. But I mean, I don't mean in Turkey, globally, but the ones that have some kind of an operation within Turkey. There are government cooperatives, but these are not the success stories. They're usually the failure stories. But there's a lot of This is sort of the 8 companies plus some others to give you a feeling of the whole domain. And there are government incentives that private businesses use. The Yevramovich operation in Philadelphia uses the government incentives, for example. There are also private dealers and producers in addition to the government cooperatives. There are what are called carpet farms, translating from the Turkish, and some of these are staged. Let me try to explain what I mean. Carpet farm is a huge hallway with 50 to 200 looms set up, with young weavers in their rural outfits weaving carpets. And while they're weaving, tourists come in, walk around, and watch them. And there's another section attached to this, which is the display and sales section. And there are piles of carpets, just like a regular carpet store. And you can buy that stuff from the sales section. And the idea is they're selling what those women there are weaving. Sometimes that is the case, but generally it's not the case. Generally, what happens is these carpets are woven anywhere in Turkey. They're flown in, and then these girls are not dressed like villagers. They come there, then they stage a performance. So if you hang around after the tourist buses leave, you will see them putting their headscarves and their shalwars away, putting their jean shorts and t-shirts on and moving out, going home from work. So that's what I mean by staged carpet farms. And a lot of tourists buy from these places thinking that they've experienced the authentic. They've seen how these were woven and they've bought one that was woven there. Not all carpet farms are like that. Some are. Another example that was striking to us was an operation in Uşak, a southwest town in Turkey. Uşak is an area that is renowned for its 13th through 18th century carpets. Uşak carpets fetch the highest prices in Sotheby's auctions, up to $30,000, $50,000, $100,000, depending on the year and the carpet. However, today, there's probably 1 or 2 looms in a home in Uşak. And I'm saying this not to say there are none, okay? However, there are carpet production facilities. Here is one of these facilities. They use Chinese weavers in China, in various different locations in China, to weave these carpets. The Chinese, different geographic areas have different weaving techniques. So a Persian weaving technique, a Turkish weaving technique, Chinese weaving technique are all different from each other. So the Chinese don't know how to weave in a Turkish weave style. So the Turkish weavers are flown to China to teach the Chinese weavers how to weave in a Turkish manner. The wool is gathered from Turkey, New Zealand, and different places in Central Asia. The yarn is manufactured industrially. It's not hand spun, it's factory made, and dyed with chemicals in Turkey. And the woven carpets woven in China are brought back to Turkey for this doctoring process, the chemical washing and pressing process, and then exported to the US, and they're sold as Turkish carpets. So are they Turkish carpets? Are they not Turkish carpets? Where's the boundary? There's another group of carpets which I call ethical and political carpets. What do I mean? Oh, I have pictures of doctoring before I go to this. This is a washing operation in Kayseri. what they do first is they take, this is a kilim, they take the flat weave, they take the kilim and there'll be little fluffs of yarn or dust or little fiber pieces hanging out. Because the modern Western consumer is imagined to want perfection, these little things need to be removed. So you don't see it, but he's using a gas flamer and flaming the stuff that sticks out off the top, the surface of the carpet. After that is done, they're washed, and there are different washing procedures and different kinds of chemicals. So one combination of chemicals are used to give one aesthetic effect, the other combination another aesthetic effect. And they're washed like this, but the stuff that's thrown on them is the liquid water with chemicals. And this is a press to give the carpet its shine and flatness. Turkish. These are Turkish. This is not the same operation. This is a different operation, Kayseri operation. These are made in Kayseri. Okay, I'm searching for another picture here, there. This is going to be funny on the week of 9/11. These are Afghan carpets, and they're called war rugs. And these were made at the time of the Russian invasion. And they were made, by local people to reflect what they were living. So these are Russian helicopters, Russian arms, and Afghan soldiers, etc. I'm sure 5 years from now we will see other Afghan war rugs, this time with American war machinery and symbolism. Okay, so there are these political concerns, such as the Afghan war rugs, or there are other kinds of concerns, such as the American political sensitivity and social sensitivity to Tibet in its relationship with China. And Tibetan rugs are sold with the notion of tranquility and minimalism. Let me try to find, I'd written down a quote, if I can find this. Yes, this is internet advertising for Tibetan rugs. Our contemporary rugs are complicated in their minimalism, creating a tranquil environment and mind. So some people buy carpets not for the passion, not for the animalistic soul of the world, not for counting the knots or any aesthetic concerns, but more for political or ethical or social concerns. Okay. Other categories of representations of carpets and creation and management of the imagery of carpets. Fashion, arts, popular culture are used in a big way. So you have lots of carpets, pillowcases with Santa Clauses on them, reindeer and Santa Claus on them, Disney figures, Mickey Mouse, Versace. This is a Versace. And you have Mondrian, Miro motifs taken from their paintings. That's one line of carpets, handmade carpets. Sold, and this, for example, was sold in an exposition in Hamburg, and the exposition is Oriental Carpets. Another way to represent carpets is on making authenticity fashionable or fashionizing authenticity and tradition. One of those is woven legends. This is the Yevramovich operation that I was talking about. They take Iranian designs, they modify them, and they work with the poorest of the poorest of the poorest villages and areas in Turkey. And they specifically choose to work with Kurdish villages because that has a nice political cachet to sell in the United States. And they're sold in stores called Material Culture in Philadelphia and other stores in New York and elsewhere in the USA and Europe. I'll show you some pictures from the Yevramovich operation. They have teachers, and teachers are dressed in white, like doctors, dentists. And each time they have a new girl, a younger girl who's a rookie, they sit with them and weave with them, and you see the model they're weaving from the model. And she not only teaches the rookies, she also does supervision and quality control. This is the top one, is in the design studio, and this is Neslihan, the lady, Turkish lady who lives in Philadelphia. And what she's doing is she's taking actual carpet pictures from catalogs of, say, a carpet from the 17th century, an Iranian carpet. She is on the computer taking that design and modifying it, simplifying it, changing the colors, changing the patterns. And then bringing to, this workshop is in Turkey, and bringing it to the design workshop in Turkey where 24 young women work. And notice that they're not villagers, they're urban people who work in the design studio. And they draw it out in a way that the villagers will be able to decipher. And let me see if I have another picture, a larger picture of the studio. No. So this is the process from the taking a reproduction and modifying it. And this is what one of their carpets look like at the end, and a modified Iranian design. And this is another type of a carpet. It says at the bottom, a folk life rug from Woven Legends. Woven Legends is their brand. This company has 3 different brand names. And Woven Legends is one of them. And I mean, even the brand itself, you know, is an attempt to create that aura. Weavers improvise whatever village scene they choose. Now, these carpets are made in Turkey by Kurds. Neither Kurds nor anyone else living in Anatolia have a tradition of putting in animal or human figures on carpets. This does not exist in Turkish carpets. It exists in Iranian carpets and some other Asian carpets, but not in Turkish carpets. So they've never done that. And they're not used to putting human figures or animal figures, even if there are humans and animals around them. What happens instead is Neslihan comes to the village, and she's following, of course. She's a very sophisticated, well-educated lady. She's following what's happening in the world and on the whole carpet trade. And she's noticing that these, especially with Santa Fe art, folk art movements, that there is something happening, and she wants to capture that in Turkish carpets, if you can call them Turkish carpets. So she comes to the village and she says, to the weavers, okay, I'm not going to give you a model. I want you to do something as you imagine, as you please. Look around you and do something in terms of what you see around you, but make sure you put in animals and people. Okay? And she told me that she does this only with the best of the weavers, which is about 3% of her weavers, because she says she doesn't trust the creative ability, the artistic ability of the rest. Obviously, because this area was not a carpet weaving area, there was no carpet weaving tradition, and the women just go there as a job, just like any other job, and they stay for a year or two and then go. So they're not really expert carpet weavers in any traditional sense. So this is the high-end woven legends. The medium range, several companies, and one of them is something called 3K. They have the largest volume of all the production sites we studied. They sell all over the world, North America, South America, Australia, Europe, everywhere. They have workshops, weaving workshops all over the world, in Turkey, Turkmenistan, China, India, on and on and on. And they sell in Turkey as well. And I have an advertising, a newspaper advertising from Turkey. I know you don't speak Turkish, but I want to draw your attention to something. First of all, the 3K carpets are sold in a store that's called the Rug Store. And this advertising was placed right before New Year's Eve. And this says, unbelievable New Year's Eve prices on Chinese handmade carpets. And look at how the price is quoted in Deutsche Marks. This was before the euro. So the price is quoted in Deutsche Marks. And then they show some pieces from their collection, Chinese carpets, Nepal, Duri, Indian, Kazakh, Shirvan from Persia, Turkmen carpet, etc. as gifts. In Turkey, we don't have Christmas. It's an Islamic country, but people give each other gifts on New Year's Eve. And then other operations. This is another brand name. As you can see, in Turkish, it also means antique. A final way of generating meaning and authenticity and representing carpets or creating carpet imagery is by recreating what the Greek creators consider to be authentic tradition. Two major ways this is done. One is going back to the roots and doing it exactly like it was done 200 years ago. This is the Dobak project, and I'll talk more about that. And the second one is taking the notion of authenticity to the art realm and saying what artists do is authentic. And tradition cannot be reproduced. Tradition can be generated, created. So what we should do, rather than copying what was done 200 years ago, is to generate modern tradition. So these two people, Tollu and Balpınar, are two people who see themselves as artists. They create the designs, and they see weavers almost like as engravers. So they do a limited series of art, and the way they exhibit is also like an art exhibit. Let me show you some of these pieces. One of them is something like this. This is on the floor of a hotel in Istanbul. The hotel is called Halı Hotel because the owner of the hotel is also a carpet dealer. And again, halı means carpet in Turkish. Um, this is a creation by Balpınar. This is another of her creations. We don't have color here, I'm sorry. She didn't have the piece, but she had a computer scanned picture. And she works with only 20 weavers. I don't have anything from Tolga Tollu because he has this policy of secrecy. He believes that people are after him and after his designs and ideas. Therefore, he's not going to let anyone know what he's doing. TT stands for Tolga Tollu's ideology and philosophy. His philosophy is something we call modernist mystique. No catalogs, no pictures, no nothing. And he works with Germans. He works with German dealers in Germany. So his style is very, very different, based on creating mystique through this secrecy. And we were not allowed to take photographs at all. This was the only operation where we were not allowed to take photographs. Okay, the two that I will focus on more, Tolga Tollu, this artist type, and in Dobak's case, they're very traditional designs, local designs, local not in a Turkish sense, but local in a small village region sense, whereas Tolga Tollu's are contemporary designs. In the Dobak case, the organization is in terms of village cooperatives. It's supervised by this project, which is linked to a university in Turkey. In Tollu's case, he sees his weavers, and he basically made the analogy. He said, it's just like my weavers are engravers, just like Matisse's engravers, in his own words. And they're commissioned to weave according to minute specifications by a dealer designer who deals and designs himself. The Dobak project was started by Harold Böhmer, who is a German, who has lived in Turkey for over 30 years. And Tolga Tollu is a Turkish, married to a German, and educated in Germany, an architect. And I underline that because it's interesting that these two major revival, at least of the materials and the quality, was begun with some sort of foreign influence. Marketing of the Dobak is publicity oriented in the international markets. They do weaving demonstrations in San Francisco, Oslo, all different kinds of places in the world. They are keen on certification. They have websites and franchises. Whereas Tolga Tollu rests on secrecy, limited edition, branding. TT is their brand. Each carpet is branded TT. Very selective distribution. A quote from Tolga Tollu. We work with Europeans. What's the zeitgeist? We do that. Reproduction carpets are like reproduction paintings, not real art. Authenticity is the honesty of the materials, the integrity of being in the times.
What's that mean?
He is, okay, Harold Böhmer, who started Dobak, was the first person who started the revival of root dyes. And his strategy was taking 200-year-old designs, 300-year-old designs, and reproducing them to the T. Tolga Tollu came a little after Harold Böhmer. And the two don't like each other that much. And the two see each other not as competitors because they're doing completely different kinds of carpets, but they're sort of hostile towards each other. So Tolga Tollu is trying to say Harold Böhmer is doing reproductions. That's no big deal. You know, What's it called, return to tradition? It's a reproduction. That's not tradition. What I'm doing is tradition if you take honesty to mean authenticity. If you take being in the times and living through the times to mean authenticity. Authenticity is not reproduction. Whereas Dobag, the Harold Böhmer, the back to roots, back to tradition people, this is how they operate. Each carpet is registered at Marmara University in Istanbul and sold with an attached leather tag guaranteeing that the carpet is dyed with natural dyes, has an authentic Turkish village pattern rather than a copy of a Caucasian or Persian design. And this is an allusion to the Yevramovich operation, which is another major competition because they're modifying Iranian designs. It's not beautified in any way with rinsings, bleachings, or other chemical mutilations to give the appearance of an antique. The buyer also gets a certificate recording the weaver's name, her village, the date of manufacture, and the total number of knots. What kind of prices they sell for? They have a bigger variety in sizes. So some of them are very small, some of them are very large. So the price also rests on that. But they have something as cheap as $500 and they go up to $5,000 in foreign markets. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kimberly.
Well, it depends on where you buy the carpet. You buy it in the village, you don't pay the dealer price.
Sure.
So like a smallish carpet might cost $300. But the same carpet sold by the dealer in San Francisco would cost like $1,000.
And the other one?
Tollus are more expensive, but he doesn't make any small ones and he doesn't sell in Turkey at all.
Although I
At
did
all.
see them sold in a couple of
Well, he claims that they're copies.
Yeah, they might.
Okay? Yeah, the very similar looking stuff is sold in the covered bazaar. Okay, I already told you this story. The recovery of natural dyes in the 70s, Böhmer key figure, and Dobag started as an academic project, but it's also a rural social development project. It's ended up spreading interest in natural dyeing initially in the region and then across all of Turkey. And it generated a new respect for new carpets. The thing about collectors and ruggies is they despise new carpets. A good carpet can only be an old carpet. So the Dobag project, as well as Yevramovich, as well as Tolga Toldo, all of them jointly, increased interest in new carpets. Dobag claims that this is a return to tradition, and this is their definition of why it is a return to tradition. How much time do I have? 5 more minutes? Okay. 10 more minutes, thank you. Because it's done as it has been done, and besides, traditional designs have always changed with historical trade routes and patterns. Furthermore, integrity, this is their definition of authenticity, comes from weavers' lived experience. Now let's look at it from a different perspective. Is it really a return to tradition? Is it really how it was done in the past? Yes, it's hand spinning. Yes, it's root dyeing. Yes, the quality weaving is there. And its trade as part of tradition is there if you look at the history of carpet trade. But this was a deliberate choice on the part of Böhmer and Marmara University, not a spontaneous continuation of something existing. It is involved with a governmental development project, not local community project initially. It's resulted in a change in gender roles. This is a complicated issue. Women are a bit more empowered compared to the past. They keep some of the money to themselves, but still men get a lot of the money. Some men have also begun to weave, which was unheard of in the past. Weavers go and demonstrate in San Francisco, which is not what happened 50 years ago. Norwegians and Americans come to the village, stay in the village for a couple days, experience the primitive. This didn't happen some time ago. Websites, of course, very new, more catering to foreign demand. So it's questionable whether this is exactly a return to tradition. Okay, what do these examples indicate? Tradition is not going away, but it's being transformed. And it's coexisting with, there's a coexistence of de-traditionalization with re-traditionalization. Authenticity, the meaning of a carpet, the aura of the carpet is being defined by multiple constituencies: weavers, dealers, foreign customers, foreign dealers, the connoisseurs, scholars. And global marketing and global communications are managing the myth and the aura of the carpets. And they're doing this through several ways. They're recreating mystique and authenticity, trying to revive passion. They're branding carpets. I mean, this is a very different kind of a commercial move compared to the historical commerce of carpets. Certifying the aesthetic and the cultural authenticity in Clifford's terms. And the final one that again got chopped off has to do with discursive justifications. 3 types of discursive justifications we have identified are being negotiated in these global networks. One is a historical legitimacy, representing authenticity in terms of the cultural authenticity, the human authenticity. A second discursive justification seems to rest on, the now, the zeitgeist, fashion design taking over. Some of it like the Versace, the branding, some of it woven legends, a fancy, different kind of a branding. The doctoring, the making of antique-looking carpets, as well as the high art aesthetics, like the Tollu and the Balpınar that I talked about. A third type of the zeitgeist, popular culture, the Disneys and the Santa Clauses. A different kind of justification in terms of the politics and the social, the Afghan war carpets, the Tibetan carpets, the Kurdish. There's another edge to this. People talk about how they don't use child labor, how the work conditions are really good. So there's a defensive aspect to this as well. A quote to illustrate the ethics involved. Weavers in the producing countries benefit significantly, as do local ecologies. The profits of successful producers are reinvested in parts of the world that desperately need support from the West. Private firms are succeeding where the UN and other foreign subsidy would surely fail. In these commercial endeavors, the West gives back pieces of Asian culture that were destroyed and damaged by earlier Western commercial influences. Is this wishful thinking? Is this reality? I leave it at that because it's sort of a romantic approach to some of the ethical issues involved. The weavers face various dilemmas. They don't really like doing this, and it's hard work, very hard work. And I'm using the word ass because this is the word that they use, that their asses hurt, their backs hurt, their hands hurt. They do it because basically they don't have a choice. If they do have a choice, they'd rather do something else. Gender relations issues are involved there, and issues of what the weaver would like to weave versus what the market wants. This is not such a big issue for all weavers, but for some weavers it is. And this one is an interesting twist. It is good for rural social development, social economic development, if the area is desperately poor. For the poorest areas, it's an improvement. However, at the same time, it gives cheap labor to the company. It does give decent income for weavers, but at the same time, you have compliant and low-paid weavers because they don't have any other alternative. So this is a domain that's woven with these dilemmas on the weaver's side. On the business's side, there's a realization of a vision to restore tradition in order to satisfy the Western aesthetic gaze. There is some sense of cultural pride and local development in all of these examples, the high quality as well as the low quality. So that still plays a role in there. And to wrap up, so what we see when we study these different sites is there's a revival. I should put the revival in quotes, actually. So there's a coexisting of the modern and the tradition as well as continuous transformations. How exactly this happens is negotiated between the global taste, local tastes, local global businesses, and local weavers. The three types of discursive justifications: historical, zeitgeist, ethical, political. Global business determines, rather than the locals themselves having agency, the aura and authenticity of carpets. Consumers have a lot of romance about this, negotiating the doubts about the modern condition with an objectified and reconstructed past. If the authentic is lost, there's a search for the authentic and the aesthetic gaze. Weavers have the dilemmas we talked about, and what ends up happening, again, my final line is cut off of there. What ends up happening is the pragmatics of businesses, local and global, try to negotiate the consumer's romance and the weaver's dilemmas with particular discursive justifications in the way they revive tradition on a global modern scale. Time's up. Thank you.